That clerk is seriously incompetent. It's so irritating. Really, they might get away with it in college, but that won't cut it in the real world. Moreover, Nancy and Joan have been quite harsh on that clerk. Despite this, the men, including myself, were sending them disapproving looks, but they seemed oblivious. I was appalled by Nancy and Joan and looked away from them, turning my gaze towards the clerk instead. At least, the clerk managed to serve a pizza margherita to a customer. However, the next moment, the clerk collapsed. I rushed over to assist, checking their pulse and performing a brief examination. Then, I asked another employee nearby to call an ambulance. Tim and the others were staring at me in surprise. After a while, the ambulance arrived, and the clerk was taken away. Sighing in relief, Mr. Smith asked me, "Who exactly are you?" "My name is Sam Brown. I'm 32 years old. I have an unfashionable appearance and wear glasses. Kind of like the stereotypical nerd you would have found in Akihabara years ago. Additionally, I'm fairly short for a man at 168 centimeters, and my appearance isn't what most would consider attractive. But I'm a doctor by profession." People listening to my introduction might think that even if I don't look good, being a doctor is enough. I used to think that way too, especially during my student days. Even then, I was not very confident and tended to be pessimistic about my looks. But there was one thing I could always take pride in: my studies. I was the type who could score well in all subjects, never getting less than 85 on any test. That's why in middle school, many classmates would ask me to help them with math. I spent days teaching math to several peers, but there was one who struggled significantly more than the others. That was Tim Williams. He was a good-looking, athletic guy who was quite popular. Yet, despite his popularity, Tim took a long time to grasp math, no matter how many times I explained it to him. Maybe God gives everyone some flaw. I thought so because Tim was really bad at math. But Tim never pretends to understand something he doesn't. He clearly states if he doesn't get it, and always thanks me when I explain something to him. He has a really pleasant personality. I began to really like him for his good nature, wondering what a nice guy he was. Maybe that's why I was able to persistently teach him math. Because of this, Tim and I continued our math study sessions for a while. Through all this, Tim and I became good friends, and we still keep in touch even now as adults. Interestingly, Tim was one of the reasons I decided to become a doctor. After getting to know him during our school days, I started to see myself more objectively. Back in the throes of adolescence, I tended to compare myself with Tim. The glaring disparities made me feel desperate even as a student. Tim, being handsome and athletic, would probably do fine even if he wasn't good at academics. He was popular and wouldn't have trouble finding work because of his physical abilities. But for me, academics were all I had. I wondered if with these traits, I might never get married in the future. Back then, I was interested in girls, wanted to be popular, and thought about marriage. Comparing myself to Tim made me anxious about the future. As a kid, I felt a sense of urgency, realizing I wanted to get married someday. Even though I hadn't decided who I wanted to marry yet, maybe I was rushing it. But back then, it felt like a serious issue to me. That's when I decided to pursue a career in medicine. Why medicine? Because doctors consistently ranked high on the media's most marriable professions list at the time. Seeing those statistics made me think, it has to be a doctor. Plus, I've always liked helping people. So, I thought being a doctor would suit my nature well. Luckily, my parents supported my decision to become a doctor. Despite the high cost of medical school, they never opposed it, which I think was very kind of them. Thus, I smoothly advanced through college and training, and became a doctor. I love my job, seeing patients every day, and I feel fulfilled by the trust they place in me. However, I felt utterly unfulfilled in my personal life. So, having become a doctor, I decided it was time to meet girls and started taking action. When I was new to being a doctor, I tried out dating apps. I chose dating apps over social mixers because, quite simply, mixers seemed like a big hurdle due to my appearance. I still didn't look great, even as an adult. I lacked the courage to attend mixers, easily imagining being ridiculed for my looks by the girls. But dating apps seemed more approachable, allowing me to meet girls and chat with them before meeting in person, which helped me get a sense of what they were like. There were many advantages to dating apps for someone new to romance like me. However, reality wasn't so kind. After starting with the apps, I met a few women, but they all turned out to be quite odd. Some were clearly only after my money. Others lied about being single when they were actually married, and some were even scammers. Honestly, I have become much more resilient regarding women, but I was done with dating apps. The reality was far harsher than I had imagined, and it felt like it might break me at any moment. Then my phone rang. It was Tim calling. "Hello." "Hey, how are you? Want to have a singles party?" Tim's sudden invitation to a singles party was unexpected, but I had lost hope in dating apps, so I quickly agreed. "Thanks, Sam. But there's one thing I need your help with." "What's that?" I asked Tim to arrange something specific for me. On the day of the singles party, Tim dropped a bombshell. "Actually, I never planned to have a singles party." "What do you mean?" Tim explained everything from start to finish. Simply put, Tim had run into an old middle school classmate, Lisa Smith, at a client's company. Feeling nostalgic, Tim had approached her when suddenly two of her colleagues intervened and eventually asked him to set up a singles party, leading us to this point. So, this singles party was essentially organized for those two colleagues. I see. I entered the singles party venue and took my seat. Today's singles party was a small gathering of 3 men and 3 women. At the singles party it was Tim, his junior White, and me. White seemed like a cute guy who was likely to be popular with the older crowd. Then the women arrived. The first to enter were the 2 colleagues who had arranged this singles party. But as soon as they saw me, they burst out laughing. I had anticipated being laughed at for my looks, but it still hurt. Finally, Lisa Smith arrived. She had been beautiful since middle school, and it seemed her beauty had only increased as she aged. Then the singles party started, and we all introduced ourselves. "I'm Sam Brown. I work as an office employee. Please take care of me today." In reality, I'm a doctor, but for today, I'm pretending to be an office employee. The favor I asked Tim for was to arrange for everyone to think I'm just an office worker, including Lisa and White. This secret plan worked perfectly. No one suspected that I'm actually a doctor. I did this because of my past experiences with dating apps, where it seemed that women were only interested in my money, likely because I was open about being a doctor. Essentially, I didn't want to meet women who were only interested in money. That's why I had arranged this subterfuge. For the setup, I was supposed to work at a small to medium-sized company, similar to Tim and White's. However, this might have backfired as no women seemed particularly interested in me after my introduction. The rude pair of colleagues didn't even make eye contact with me. From the moment they entered, it seemed Joan was focused on White and Nancy on Tim. So, I guess it was inevitable that things turned out this way. But Lisa Smith alone approached me. "Brown, right. We were classmates in middle school. Remember me, Lisa Smith?" "Yes, of course." I was pleased that she remembered me. I had hoped to share some pleasant memories with her, but that hope was soon shattered. Nancy suddenly interrupted my conversation with Lisa. "Lisa, you'll catch the uncool if you keep talking to him." "Exactly. You'd benefit way more chatting with guys like White or Williams." "What?" Lisa seemed confused and unsure how to respond to Nancy and Joan's remarks. Tim and White tried to defuse the awkward situation with a now, but they were clearly put off by the intensity of Nancy and Joan. Feeling like my presence was causing trouble, I quietly headed to the restroom. As I was about to return to the table, I heard Nancy and Joan's voices nearby. Looking around to locate them, I saw them at the drink station, chatting while holding a few glasses. Not wanting to be seen, I ended up eavesdropping from behind cover. I thought they might be bad-mouthing me, but the conversation was surprisingly different. "Lisa really can't read the room, can she?" "I know, right? Talking to someone with a face like Brown's, she's so clueless." "Seriously, what's the point of befriending someone with a below-average face and a small company employee?" "Exactly. It's because she's naive like that she ends up doing our work." "Right. Just hint at feeling a bit guilty about having unavoidable commitments, and Lisa will take over for us." "Yeah, a fool can be a useful tool if you know how to use them." Nancy and Joan continued their petty backstage talk. To sum it up, Nancy and Joan only see Lisa as a convenient colleague who will do their work for them. The reason for setting up this singles party was because Nancy wanted to get closer to Tim, and Joan wanted to connect with someone Tim knew. Essentially, Lisa was being used by Nancy and Joan, both at work and at this mixer. After confirming that Nancy and Joan had returned to their seats, I slowly made my way back to mine. But having witnessed the women's manipulative behavior in just a few minutes left me with a heavy heart. I managed to make it back to the table where everyone was waiting, but I was already feeling like I wanted to go home. Perhaps that's why I started drinking faster. Then, as if someone had ordered it, a college-aged waitress came to our table with a dish in hand. "Sorry for the wait, here's your margarita pizza." However, everyone at the table seemed confused by her words. "We didn't order pizza, so I think you have the wrong table." "Yeah. I'm terribly sorry." It appeared the waitress had made a mistake and quickly headed off to another table. I thought the waitress's novice manner was charming, but Nancy and Joan seemed irritated. "That waitress is seriously terrible at her job, it's so annoying." Really, she might get away with it in college, but that won't cut it in the real world. Moreover, Nancy and Joan were quite harsh on the waitress. Despite this, the men, including myself, were sending them disapproving looks, but they seemed oblivious. I was appalled by Nancy and Joan and looked away from them, turning my gaze towards the waitress instead. At least, the waitress managed to serve a margarita pizza to a customer. However, the next moment, the waitress collapsed. I rushed over to assist, checking her pulse and performing a brief examination. Then, I asked another employee nearby to call an ambulance. Tim and the others were staring at me in surprise. After a while, the ambulance arrived, and the waitress was taken away. Sighing in relief, Lisa Smith asked me, "Who exactly are you?" "Well, actually, I'm a doctor," I said, and Nancy and Joan quickly pushed Lisa aside to interject. At this point, it was clear from their behavior how greedy they were, even without speaking. I felt a sigh coming on just watching them. However, they didn't seem to notice my dismay as they began sweet-talking me with cloying voices and batting eyelashes. "So you were really a doctor. You should have just told us that. Did you pretend to be an office worker because White and Williams work at small companies? It's not just your smarts but your thoughtfulness that's top-notch." Honestly, since Nancy and Joan are also 32, their approach seemed painfully awkward. That's why I unconsciously stepped back from them. The shock of their sudden change in behavior towards me left me speechless. Yet, Nancy and Joan, oblivious to my reaction, kept pressing closer as I stayed silent. I thought there would be no end to this if I didn't speak up, so I confronted them. "Excuse me. But a moment ago you were clearly mocking me, weren't you? And now that you know I'm a doctor, you just flip your attitude like that? Do you even realize how disrespectful you're being? I'm feeling pretty offended here." I stared them down, angry. Getting angry at someone like this was usually reserved for patients who ignored my advice and worsened their condition. Which made me think that Nancy and Joan really must be geniuses at provoking people. I was so angry that I was shaking. Nancy and Joan, apparently not expecting me to speak up or get angry, couldn't hide their surprise at my reaction. Seeing them react this way only irritated me more. At this point, I wondered if they were geniuses at making people angry. So, I couldn't help but sigh. At which point, Nancy snapped at me. Just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you can get all high and mighty. Exactly. If you had told us you were a doctor from the start, we wouldn't have treated you like that. Don't you get it? You're the ones who are overstepping. I'm completely appalled by your arrogant behavior. What I'm saying is you shouldn't treat anyone poorly. Regardless of their job, how can you not understand such a fundamental thing? Sam, getting heated with them is pointless. I heard a voice from behind and turned to see Tim, with White by his side. Both Tim and White were glaring firmly at Nancy and Joan. That's right, if they were decent people, they wouldn't belittle others like that. White said firmly, clearly upset by what he had seen happening to me. Having Tim and White by my side clearly affirmed in this situation. I felt a new strength welling up inside me, warming my heart. That's why I was able to confront Nancy and Joan. Let me be frank as a doctor, Nancy and Joan, it's too late for you. Why did you let it come to this? When I announced this almost like a checkmate, Nancy and Joan turned red with rage, like kettles boiling over. What do you mean, too late for us? Seriously, we could sue you for diagnostic error and human rights violations. Well, if you want to sue, go ahead. I have friends who are excellent lawyers, and it's clear I'd win easily against you. Are you kidding me? Stupid. You two are so foolish, let me spell it out for you. You're morally bankrupt. When I said it's too late, I meant your character is beyond redemption. Have I broken it down enough for you to understand? Do you get it now? How dare you say our character is finished? Jer, just because we teased you a bit, you freak out like this, that's scary, really scary. Right, what if he turns into a criminal and there's a bounty on his head? If that happens, we'll just use others to catch him and split the bounty among ourselves. Right, that's brilliant. Jerry, keep the compliments coming. Incredibly, Nancy and Joan started treating me like a criminal. It's frightening to see that they so easily continue their habit of mocking others without hesitation, given how deeply ingrained it seems to be in them. I sighed again. And then Nancy and Joan snapped at me once more. What, you still have complaints against us? Seriously, so annoying. Maybe you're not even a good doctor, just a quack. Ahaha, you nailed it. Right. How many times today had I seen Nancy and Joan get carried away making fun of me? I was fed up with their relentless and unrepentant behavior, which really angered me. So, I yelled louder than before. I have plenty of complaints, and for the record, I am not a quack. My patience has completely run out, so now, I must say this. Nancy and Joan were still giggling. What are you going to say now? It's probably just another quack diagnosis. How silly. You two have been having Lisa do your work for you, haven't you? What were you thinking? How do you even know about that? What exactly are you? I overheard you talking about it at the drink bar. I was quite shocked at the time. Hearing this, Nancy and Joan finally seemed concerned, their expressions darkening. Tim and White then gave them a very cold look. From their perspective, dedicated as they are to their work, such actions by Nancy and Joan must have been particularly inexcusable. Proof of this was how both Tim and White sighed deeply. It's just unbelievable, dumping your assigned work on Lisa. That's not something responsible adults do. Exactly, and then you have the nerve to criticize that waitress who fainted. Acting all high and mighty about professionalism, that's the worst. When Tim and White spoke so sternly, Nancy and Joan started making excuses. No, it's not like that. We just had some unavoidable commitments, you see. Right. Work is all about helping each other, right, Lisa? Jackson desperately called out to Lisa. Either seeking rescue from the current predicament or perhaps just trying to get her to cover for them somehow. It was hard to tell. Yet, Lisa's expression was complex. But then, Lisa seemed to resolve her feelings and said, "You both have often left your work to me, saying you were busy. I knew it all along. That you were pawning off your work on me to go to social events. I'm fully aware that I was being used. Please don't underestimate me." Everyone was shocked by Lisa's unexpected declaration. What? Why would you agree to take on their work, knowing they were going out? Exactly. Why would you put yourself in such a convenient position for them? Tim and White seemed quite puzzled by Lisa's actions. Nancy and Joan, who had been offloading their work and going out, were visibly shaken, trembling with fear when their actions came to light. I continued to watch over Lisa. Why? Because caring for Anna and Kathy seemed the right thing to do, Lisa responded. Lisa, thank you. We knew you wouldn't betray us, Lisa. Saying this, Nancy and Joan cozied up to Lisa again. It felt like a scene I had seen before. But by now, it was clear that Nancy and Joan were the type to ingratiate themselves with anyone. As I observed the women, I wondered if Lisa was going to be manipulated by Nancy and Joan into pretending everything was okay. But in the next moment, Lisa took a surprising action. "Don't touch me." Lisa said this as she backed away from Nancy and Joan, who were trying to cozy up to her. Nancy and Joan, not expecting Lisa to react this way, raised their voices angrily. "Lisa, what do you mean by this? Don't touch me. We were good colleagues, weren't we?" "Good colleagues? Don't make me laugh. I no longer trust you, and I don't want to be friendly with you. Plus, I'm going to be a manager next month, so I'm not on the same level as you anymore. Do you understand that?" "But, you said we were important to you." "Jay, if we were so important, that's why you took over our work even knowing we were going out, right?" The revelation that Lisa was about to become a manager added to Nancy and Joan's panic. They likely feared that once Lisa was in charge, she might expose their misdeeds to the higher-ups, potentially leading to their dismissal. So, they were desperate to keep Lisa on their side. But Lisa was unstoppable. "Are you still bringing up the past? I started despising you when you treated Mr. Brown so badly. And with your habit of belittling others, you must have looked down on me too, right?" "No, that's not true." "Yes, exactly." Lisa, unsure whether to trust Nancy and Joan's words, turned to me with a question. "Mr. Brown, these two are lying, aren't they?" "Yes, Lisa, you're correct. At the drink bar, Nancy and Joan were belittling you. They said that if they acted a bit apologetic and claimed they had unavoidable commitments, you would do their work, calling you a convenient tool." As I answered, Lisa's face turned red with anger. "They also said that by talking to someone with an unattractive face like mine, you were out of touch." "I see. Thank you for telling me." This confirmed that Nancy and Joan were indeed mocking Lisa. "The reason I was doing your work was partly because you two are not great at it, but mostly because I wanted to help you achieve your dreams." "What dreams are those?" "Anna and Kathy's dream was to become housewives. You both talked every day about wanting to quit your jobs and become housewives as soon as possible. So I did your work quietly while you went to social events without getting mad." "Is that so? But I was wondering why there were no signs of you two becoming housewives. And seeing your behavior at today's singles party, I understand why you can't get married. I really want the time and effort I spent on you two back," Lisa said, glaring sharply at Nancy and Joan. Unable to find words or perhaps overwhelmed with guilt, Nancy and Joan just looked down, seeming sorry. As the atmosphere grew tense, Tim and White lighten the mood with their chuckling. What's so funny? Can you believe it, in this day and age, where dual-income households are the norm, Nancy and Joan still dream of being housewives? That's a bit unrealistic. They're adults, but they don't understand how childish that sounds. Exactly. If they were serious about finding marriage partners, they should be at a marriage bureau, not at the singles party. Their poor time management just shows how incapable they are at work. Stung by Tim and White's harsh digs, Nancy and Joan looked like they were about to cry. Do you understand now why I said you were beyond help? As I delivered the final blow, the two nodded in acknowledgement. Subsequently, Nancy and Joan were fired from the company. To be specific, their dismissal wasn't just because they lied about having unavoidable commitments to push work onto Lisa. So why were Nancy and Joan fired now? Because they couldn't kick their bad habits. Specifically, although they stopped dumping work on Lisa, they began to offload it onto their juniors instead. They probably couldn't forget the sweetness of exploiting others. Despite being warned so much by others, they hadn't learned their lesson and were reportedly attending mixers again in search of a marriage partner. It seems like their juniors were temporarily exploited just like Lisa had been. But given their nature, Nancy and Joan were probably too foolish and careless. Because colleagues had seen Nancy and Joan entering a restaurant with a mixed group of people. It was clear they were at a mixer. This information about their misconduct reached Lisa, who, appalled, consulted with higher-ups, leading to Nancy and Joan being fired. At this point, it was simply a case of them getting their just desserts. No one offered them words of comfort. As for me, I had successfully exchanged contact information with Lisa during that singles party, and we still email each other. Our emails are mostly about encouraging each other to work hard. Lisa has safely become a manager and seems to be busier with work than ever. But I believe that tough Lisa will be fine. I had never had someone to talk about work with, so this was a refreshing and joyful experience for me. Working in society can seem like a battle with others, but really, it's a much longer battle with oneself. Having someone to support and accompany me through these lonely days makes me feel I can push harder. It shows that good things happen when you keep working hard.